They move through crowds like ghosts, silent, observant, calculating. To everyone else, they seem untouchable, almost arrogant in their self-containment. But here's what nobody sees. Behind that composed exterior lies a storm of anxiety that would shock you. We're talking about INTJ in social situations, and the truth is far more complex than you'd imagine. These are the people who can architect entire business strategies, solve problems that leave others stumped, and see patterns 20 steps ahead. Yet put them in a room full of small talk and watch them internally combust. It's not what you think, though. This isn't about being shy or awkward. This is about something much deeper, much more strategic, and honestly, much more exhausting. Today, we're diving into the hidden world of INTJ social anxiety. Why the most analytical minds on the planet turn into overthinking machines the moment they have to navigate human interaction. We're going to explore the real reasons behind their social fears, the mental gymnastics they perform just to get through a conversation, and why understanding this could completely change how you see the quiet strategist in your life. But first, let me paint you a picture. Imagine having a brain that never stops analyzing, that sees every possible outcome, every potential mistake, every way a conversation could go wrong. Now imagine that same brain trying to navigate the chaotic, unpredictable world of human emotion and social dynamics. That's the INTJ experience, and it's more intense than you realize. INTJ don't fear social situations because they're introverted. Plenty of introverts handle social settings just fine. They fear them because their minds work differently. They're wired to seek patterns, to understand systems, to predict outcomes. But human interaction? That's the one system that refuses to be systematized. And for a mind that thrives on logic and predictability, that's terrifying. Let's start with the first fear that haunts every INTJ in social settings: the fear of meaningless interaction. You know that moment when someone asks how you're doing, but they don't actually want to know? That exchange that serves no purpose beyond filling silence? For most people, that's just politeness. For INTJ, it's torture. Their brains are constantly asking why. Why are we talking about the weather when there are real problems to solve? Why are we exchanging pleasantries when we could be discussing ideas that actually matter? They're not being rude or antisocial. They genuinely cannot understand the point of surface-level conversation. It feels like a waste of mental energy, and they'd rather save that energy for something meaningful. But here's where it gets complicated. INTJ understand that social rituals exist for a reason. They know that small talk serves a social function. They just can't emotionally connect with it. So they're stuck in this weird space where they intellectually know they should participate, but every fiber of their being rebels against it. That creates internal tension that most people never see. This leads us to their second major fear: the fear of being misunderstood. INTJ communicate in a very specific way. They're direct, they cut to the point, and they assume others want the same level of intellectual honesty they bring to conversations. But that's not how most social interaction works. Picture this scenario. An INTJ is at a work meeting. Someone presents an idea that has obvious flaws. The INTJ points out these flaws, not to be mean, but because they genuinely want to improve the idea. They think they're being helpful. But everyone else hears criticism. They see someone being negative or difficult. The INTJ walks away confused about why people seem upset, and others walk away thinking the INTJ is harsh or arrogant. This happens constantly. INTJ say exactly what they mean, assuming others will appreciate their directness. Instead, they're labeled as cold, insensitive, or overly critical. Over time, this creates a deep fear of being fundamentally misunderstood. They start to realize that their natural communication style doesn't translate well in social settings, but they don't know how to fix it without feeling fake. Now let's talk about their third fear, and this one might surprise you. INTJs are terrified of emotional unpredictability. Remember, these are people who excel at reading patterns and predicting outcomes. But emotions don't follow logical patterns. People can be happy one moment and upset the next, often for reasons that seem completely random to the INTJ mind. They walk into social situations knowing they might accidentally say something that triggers an emotional response they didn't see coming. They can't predict when someone might take offense, when a joke might fall flat, or when their honest feedback might hurt someone's feelings. That uncertainty is deeply unsettling for minds that are used to having control through understanding, so they develop hypervigilance. They're constantly scanning for emotional cues, trying to read the room, attempting to predict how their words will land. It's exhausting. Imagine trying to navigate a minefield while blindfolded, but the mines keep moving. That's what social interaction feels like for many INTJ. This brings us to perhaps their deepest fear, the fear of vulnerability. INTJ guard their inner world fiercely. They've usually spent years building up their intellectual confidence, their strategic thinking abilities, their sense of competence. But social situations have a way of exposing areas where they feel less confident. They might be brilliant at analyzing market trends, but ask them to navigate office politics, and they're lost. They can solve complex problems in isolation, but put them in a group brainstorming session where ideas are flying around chaotically, and they shut down. These situations force them to confront areas where their usual strengths don't apply. The vulnerability goes deeper, though. Social interaction requires a level of openness that doesn't come naturally to INTJ. They're used to keeping their cards close to their chest, revealing information strategically. But genuine connection requires letting people see who you really are, and that feels incredibly risky to someone who's built their identity around intellectual superiority and emotional control. Here's what makes this even more complex. INTJ actually crave deep connection. They want meaningful relationships. They want to be understood and appreciated for who they are. But the path to those connections runs directly through their biggest fears. They have to navigate small talk to get to deep conversation. They have to risk being misunderstood to find people who truly get them. They have to embrace emotional unpredictability to experience genuine intimacy. It's like wanting to reach a beautiful destination, but knowing the only road there goes through everything that terrifies you. So many INTJ just avoid the journey altogether. They convince themselves they don't need social connection, that they're better off alone. But that's rarely true. What happens instead is they develop elaborate coping mechanisms. They script conversations in advance, running through potential scenarios like they're preparing for a presentation. They stick to topics they know well, steering conversations toward areas where they feel competent. They observe from the sidelines, analyzing social dynamics like they're studying a foreign culture. Some INTJ become social chameleons, developing different personas for different situations. They learn to mimic social behaviors that seem to work, even if those behaviors don't feel authentic. Others retreat into roles where their directness is valued, like becoming the expert who's consulted for their knowledge rather than their social skills. But all of these strategies come with costs. The constant analysis is mentally draining. The scripting feels inauthentic. The chameleoning creates distance from their true selves, and the retreating leads to isolation that feeds their fears rather than addressing them. The irony is that many of the qualities that make INTJ afraid of social situations are actually valuable in relationships. Their honesty, their depth, their ability to see through surface-level interactions to what really matters. But they're so focused on their perceived social deficits that they can't see their strengths. This creates a vicious cycle. The more they avoid social situations, the less practice they get. The less practice they get, the more awkward they feel when they do engage. The more awkward they feel, the more they want to avoid social situations. It's a trap that many INTJ find themselves in, especially as they get older and their social circles naturally shrink. But here's where things get really interesting. The fear runs deeper than just social awkwardness or anxiety. There's a fundamental terror that most INTJ never admit, even to themselves. They're afraid that if people truly knew how their minds worked, they'd be seen as weird, intense, or even threatening. Think about it. While others are discussing weekend plans, INTJ are mentally redesigning the entire office layout for better efficiency. While people are sharing funny stories, they're analyzing the psychological patterns behind why certain stories get laughs. Their minds never stop working, never stop optimizing, never stop seeing what could be improved. And they know that level of constant analysis would freak people out. So they learn to hide it. They nod along when conversations turn shallow. They laugh at jokes they've already deconstructed. They pretend to care about topics that bore them to tears. It's like wearing a mask that gets heavier every time they put it on. The longer the social interaction, the more exhausting it becomes to maintain the facade. This leads to what I call the INTJ social battery drain. You know how your phone battery dies faster when you're running multiple apps? That's what happens to INTJ in social settings. They're running conversation simulation software, emotional prediction algorithms, and social norm compliance programs all at the same time. No wonder they need to disappear and recharge after group events. But there's another layer to this that nobody talks about. INTJ are secretly afraid they're broken. They see other people navigating social situations effortlessly, making friends easily, enjoying parties and gatherings. Meanwhile, they're struggling with basic small talk and feeling drained after an hour of socializing. They start to wonder if something is fundamentally wrong with them. This self-doubt creates a dangerous spiral. They begin to believe they're socially defective, which makes them even more self-conscious in social situations. They overanalyze every interaction, looking for evidence that they've said something wrong or weird. They interpret neutral responses as negative reactions. They assume people find them boring or strange, even when there's no evidence to support that belief. The fear of being found out becomes overwhelming. What if people discover that behind the confident exterior is someone who has no idea how to make casual friends? What if they realize that this person who seems so put together actually lies awake replaying conversations, wondering if they came across as too intense or not engaged enough? And then there's the comparison trap. INTJ watch extroverts work a room and feel like they're watching a different species. They see how easily others connect, how naturally conversation flows, how effortlessly social bonds form. They don't realize that what looks easy often isn't, that many people are just better at hiding their own social anxieties. This creates what I call the INTJ paradox. They desperately want authentic connection, but are terrified of being authentic. They crave deep relationships, but fear the vulnerability required to build them. They want to be understood, but are afraid of being truly seen. It's like being thirsty, but being afraid of water. The workplace makes this even more complicated. INTJ often excel professionally, because their analytical skills are valued in business contexts. They can present data, solve problems, and think strategically. But then comes the office party, the team-building exercise, the casual lunch with colleagues. Suddenly, their professional confidence evaporates. They watch coworkers who might be less competent at the actual job navigate office politics and social dynamics with ease. They see people getting promoted based on relationships rather than merit. They realize that social skills often matter more than technical expertise, and that realization is crushing for someone who's built their identity around intellectual competence. Many INTJ develop what I call social perfectionism. Since they can't rely on natural social intuition, they try to approach socializing like any other problem to be solved. They study body language guides, memorize conversation starters, practice small talk in mirrors. They turn socializing into a technical skill to be mastered, rather than a natural human experience to be enjoyed. But this approach backfires because it makes them even more self-conscious. Instead of being present in conversations, they're monitoring their performance. Instead of listening to others, they're calculating their next response. Instead of connecting authentically, they're executing a social strategy. People can sense this artificial quality, which creates the exact opposite of what INTJ are trying to achieve. The fear also manifests in their relationships with people they actually care about. INTJ often worry that their friends only tolerate them out of politeness. They assume their family finds them difficult or demanding. They convince themselves that their romantic partners would be happier with someone more socially skilled. This insecurity drives them to overcompensate in ways that push people away. They might become overly analytical about their relationships, constantly questioning whether people really want them around. They might withdraw preemptively to avoid being rejected. Or they might try so hard to be someone they're not that they lose touch with what makes them valuable in the first place. The tragedy is that INTJ often possess exactly what many people are looking for in relationships. They're loyal, thoughtful, and capable of incredible depth. They remember details that matter to you. They think about your problems even when you're not around, and they're genuinely interested in understanding who you are beneath the surface. But they're so convinced they're socially inadequate that they hide these qualities behind walls of protection. Here's what's really happening beneath all these fears. INTJ are terrified of being ordinary. They've built their entire identity around being different, special, intellectually superior. But social situations have a way of making everyone feel ordinary. When you're struggling with the same small talk and social anxieties as everyone else, it's hard to maintain that sense of uniqueness that feels so central to who you are. They're also afraid of losing control. INTJ feel most comfortable when they can predict and influence outcomes. But social dynamics are inherently unpredictable. You can't control how people will react, what they'll think of you, or where conversations will lead. That loss of control feels dangerous to someone who's used to being the strategist, the one who sees all the angles. The fear creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more anxious they become about social situations, the more awkward they feel during them. The more awkward they feel, the more they avoid them. The more they avoid them, the more their fears grow. It becomes a prison of their own making, built from overthinking and reinforced by avoidance. But here's what INTJ don't realize about their fears. Most people aren't paying as much attention to their social performance as they think. That conversation they're replaying obsessively? The other person probably forgot about it 5 minutes later. That slightly awkward pause? Nobody else noticed. Their fear of being judged is often much worse than any actual judgment they might face. The path forward requires understanding that their social fears aren't evidence of fundamental brokenness. They're evidence of a mind that processes information differently. Once they stop fighting their nature and start working with it, social situations become much more manageable. But that's a story for how they can overcome these fears, not just understand them. So there it is. The hidden truth behind why INTJ fear social situations. It's not about being antisocial or arrogant. It's about minds that are wired for depth, trying to navigate a world that often values surface-level connection. It's about analytical thinkers trying to decode the one system that refuses to be systematized. It's about people who crave authentic connection, but fear the vulnerability required to achieve it. If you're an INTJ watching this, know that your fears are valid, but they don't define your worth. Your analytical nature, your depth, your hunger for meaningful connection, these aren't flaws to be fixed. They're strengths waiting to be understood and channeled properly. The world needs minds like yours, even if social situations don't always feel welcoming. And if you know an INTJ, be patient with their process. That quiet person in the corner isn't judging you. They're probably judging themselves. That direct communicator isn't trying to hurt your feelings. They're trying to help in the only way they know how. Behind that composed exterior is someone who thinks deeply, feels intensely, and just wants to be understood. The fear is real, but it doesn't have to be permanent. Understanding the why is the first step toward breaking free from the cycle. And trust me, the journey is worth it. Hit that subscribe button if this resonated with you, and let me know in the comments if you've experienced these fears yourself. You're not alone in this. Like, share, and subscribe if you felt this. And if you're an INTJ, drop a red heart in the comments to let the rest of us know you're watching.